Alright guys, today we are going to be focusing on properties for algebraic expressions. What a property is, it's basically a statement that is true for any set of numbers. These 5 properties that we have, the commutative property, the associative property, the additive identity, multiplicative identity, and multiplicative property of 0 are the 5 properties we're going to be focusing on this lesson. The 2 most important ones, which will come up time and time again, are the commutative property and the associative property. For the commutative property basically states the order in which of addition and multiplication does not change the sum or product. Does not change it. For example, algebraically, you can look at it as A plus B is equal to B plus A. So if A is 3 and B is 4, isn't 3 plus 4 the exact same as 4 plus 3? Both of them equal 7. The same thing goes with multiplication. If you have 3 times 4, isn't that the exact same as 4 times 3? 3 times 4 is 12. 4 times 3 is 12. So the commutative property states that you can flip the numbers in addition and multiplication, and it will be the exact same sum or product. The commutative property does not work with subtraction or division. Repeat, the commutative property does not work with subtraction or division. It only works with addition and multiplication. The associative property is sort of like the commutative property, except one huge difference. The associative property states that the order in which the numbers are grouped together when added or multiplied does not change the sum or product. The important part is that it is grouped together. That is the difference between the associative and the commutative. So for example, if we're doing addition, we do 1 plus 2 plus 3. But we're going to add in some parentheses. So we know when we add in the parentheses, we're supposed to work the parentheses first due to the order of operations. We're saying that that is the exact same thing as 1 plus 2 plus 3, but the parentheses are around the 2 plus 3. So when we are doing the order of operations first, on the left side of the equation, we would do 1 plus 2 first, which would be 3. Bring down whatever's left. Then we would work 3 plus 3. That equals 6. But if we go over to the right side of the equation, we would have to do the inside of the parentheses first, which is 2 plus 3. So 2 plus 3 is 5. Bring down the rest. And then we would have 1 plus 5. That is also equal to 6. So the associative property is stating when it comes to addition, it doesn't matter where the parentheses are. You will get the exact same equation, or the exact same answer. Same thing happens when it deals with multiplication. If you do 1 times 2 times 3, add in the parentheses, that's equal to 1 times 2 times 3. Add in the parentheses. The first one that we would do on the left is 1 times 2. That's equal to 2. Bring down everything else, times 3. And then we would have 2 times 3. That is equal to 6. Now on the right side of the equation, we would have to do the inside the parentheses first due to order of operations. We would have 2 times 3. So that is equal to 6. Bring down everything else. Then we would have to do 1 times 6. 1 times 6 is equal to 6. So 6 is equal to 6. This only works for addition and multiplication. It only works for addition and multiplication. It does not work for subtraction and division. Alright, the additive identity is very straightforward. It's something that you've known, but now we're actually giving a property name to it. So the additive identity basically states when you add a 0 to a number, you will always get that number. Algebraically, it'll show it as, if we have a number x, and then we add 0 to it, we're always going to get x. Another way of just looking at it numerically, what is 4 plus 0? Of course, it's always going to be 4. Or 10 plus 0, always going to be 10. Or, let's see here, 1 million plus 0, that's always going to equal 1 million. Pretty easy, pretty obvious. The additive identity, add a 0 to the number, you're always going to get that number. So the multiplicative identity is fairly similar to the additive identity, where we are trying to find some number where you add or multiply it, you'll get that exact same number. In the multiplicative identity, when you multiply any number by 1, you will always get that number. It's something that you're fairly used to seeing as already. So if you do x times 1, you're always going to get x. So for another example, 4 times 1, you get 4. Or 8 times 1, always get 8. Or 1,000 times 1, you're always going to get 1,000. So any number times 1 is always going to be that number. This is called the multiplicative identity. The multiplicative property of 0 is another property that you should be aware of, but now we're just putting a name to the property. So with the multiplicative property of 0, it's basically when you multiply any number by 0, the product is always 0. So for example, if we have x times 0, we are always going to get 0. So 4 times 0, always equal to 0. 17 times 0, always equal to 0. 5,422 times 0, always equal to 0. So this is the multiplicative property of 0. Any number multiplied by 0, answer is always 0. Alright, so now that we know some of the properties, now they're going to want us to simplify some expressions. So with the first example, we have, in the parentheses, we have 3 plus c, and outside the parentheses, plus 7. So we can't, when we're working inside the parentheses, we can't really add 3 and c together because you can't add a number with a variable. But we know with the properties that we can move the numbers around. So for example, we could move the 3 and the c around. So we could have c plus 3 plus 7. That is the commutative property because we changed the c and the 3 in the position. Now with the associative property, what we could do is move the parentheses. So we could move the parentheses around the numbers. So we could have 3c plus, and then open parentheses, 3 plus 7. So from here, now we can work inside of the parentheses. We have our 3 plus 7. So the answer that we would come up with is c plus 10. We can't add these two together because one of them is a variable, one of them is a number, and variables and numbers do not mix together. So we would just have c plus 10. And the next one, we have our multiplication. It's the same exact thing that we were looking at. We could change around whatever is in the parentheses to make it 11 times 4 times f. Because of the commutative property, we can switch the 4 and the f together. From here, we can use the associative property, where all we would have to do is move the parentheses to show it as 11 times 4 times f. This is because of the associative property. Now we can solve 11 times 4. So we would have 44 times f. Or this also could be written as 44f. You don't have to have the multiplication sign in the middle, so we can just drop the multiplication sign, and you put 44f right next to each other. That shows that it's multiplication. So the final answer is going to be 44 times f, or 44f. Alright, so now what I want you to do, it's your turn. I want you to pause the video, try the examples, and unpause the video when you're ready to see the way that I'm solving it. Alright, so the first thing it looks like in our first example, we already have in the parentheses the numbers, so all we would have to do is multiply the 5 times the 7 to get 35, and from here all we would have left is a times 35. A times 35 is the exact same thing as 35 times a, based off of the commutative property. And usually the way that you would probably write this is 35a, all right next to each other. So this would be the answer. All right, and then in the last one, it looks like we're going to have to do the commutative property to switch around the m plus 8. So we're going to switch this around, rewrite it. So you'd have 10 plus 8 plus m. So that is the commutative property. With the associative property, we could move the parentheses. So we would rewrite it as 10 plus 8 plus m. So from this, we would be able to solve inside of the parentheses. So we would have 18 plus m as the final answer, because we cannot combine variables and numbers.